Hi everyone. In this lecture we're going to be talking about Chapter 3, Communication and the Self. And in this chapter we're going to start to explore our identity. And we're going to be getting into the self-disclosure aspect of this chapter, which for some of us is really easy, and for others of us it's really difficult, and it might take you out of your comfort zone. So before I talk about a self-concept, I want to play this quick video for you.
Look, I can be a son. Now, my whole house is great. I can do anything good. I like my school. I like anything. I like my dad. I like my cousins. I like my aunts. I like my Allisons. I like my moms. I like my sisters. I like my dad. I like my hair. I like my haircuts. I like my pajamas. I like my stuff. I like my rooms. I like my whole house. My whole house is great. I can do anything good. Yeah. I can do anything good. Better than anyone. Better than anyone.
So that little girl is just awesome. And she has an obviously very healthy self-concept. So what is a self-concept anyway? Well, your textbook defines it as the relatively stable set of perceptions you hold of yourself. Now, they may not always be accurate perceptions, but they are what we truly believe about ourselves. So this basically answers that who am I question. And we're trying to really think about what is our identity. So when you're thinking about your identity, maybe some of you talk about a lifestyle, right? Maybe you're an outdoorsy type of person. Maybe you're an athlete, or you're just male or female, being a son, daughter, or friend. There are so many components of our identity. It's a very complex part of who we are. And our self-concept is usually mirrored by those that we surround ourselves with, and this is our reflected appraisal. Our reflected appraisal is our parents telling us who we are, what we are, our friends mirroring back how they feel about us. I'm sure you all have heard that saying before, that if you're called something long enough, eventually you may start to believe it. So when you think about people who have low self-esteem, maybe they have low self-esteem because maybe a parent told them that they were stupid their whole life. Well, they may start to actually believe it. But it also works both ways. If you're constantly built up to believe that you are the best, then chances are you're going to have that mentality and that self-concept. If you're always told that you're creative, artistic, talented, strong, brilliant, whatever those appraisals are, however people reinforce who you are, those are things that become part of your identity. Your textbook defines reflected appraisal as a mirroring of the judgments of those of other people. This is how our self-concept develops, or how we start to form and believe who and what we are. As we talk about identity in Chapter 1, they give examples of children who were raised isolated and how they lost that part of their identity as even being part of the human race. If you have no one there to tell you that you're human, why would you feel that you are? You just wouldn't know. Reflected appraisal also leads us to self-esteem. Self-esteem is believing in yourself, or believing in your self-worth. If you remember back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this is the fourth need that we may need to meet. Our self-esteem is also reflected through the appraisal of other people, whether it's reinforcement through good schoolwork, through conversations, or through social interaction, through maybe achievement in sports, for example. If you look on page 71, if you have the 14th edition of your textbook, it shows both the positive and the negative self-esteem cycle. Low self-esteem is reinforced by undesirable behavior or thoughts that you just can't accomplish something. Whereas the positive cycle shows that you can do this, shows that you are positively reinforced either by your own thoughts or by the thoughts of other people. So reflective appraisal has a lot of weight in everything that we do, whether it's work, whether it's our schoolwork or academics. If we constantly fail, oftentimes we tend to give up. That would be part of the negative self-esteem cycle. Your textbook defines significant others as a person whose opinion is important enough to strongly affect one's self-concept. So our society most often calls our significant other a boyfriend or girlfriend, or the person that we're dating, someone who is specifically special. But really, a significant other is anyone who has a strong enough opinion to affect our self-concept or how we feel about ourselves. So this could be your parents, it could be your brother or sister, your aunts, uncles, grandparents, mentors, supervisors, anyone in the capacity to affect how you feel about yourself. Anyone important enough to tell you something and then you're going to believe it. And of course, this might affect your emotional well-being and your self-esteem. In addition to our significant others, we're also constantly comparing ourselves to other people, especially in American society. We tend to hold the media up and each other up as a mirror on how we feel about ourselves. Your textbook defines this as evaluating ourselves in comparison with others. And your textbook also talks about something called reference groups. And these are people that we're constantly looking at to see how we need to be, whether it's celebrities on television, the best dressed person at school. It could possibly be a role model on a job where you need to learn how to dress and how to act and how to speak in a way that's appropriate or inappropriate. And this changes across the different scenarios that we always find ourselves in. Reference groups can also be indicative of our hobbies and our interests as well. We can have different reference groups when we're at school, and when we step outside of school, we can have a completely different reference group with our friends, our family, or whatever other situation that we find ourselves in. How we see ourselves and how we feel about ourselves changes constantly, and so does the perception of others and ourselves. Your textbook talks about something called the foggy mirror. The foggy mirror is where people view themselves more positively than others. This is where you believe that you're better than everyone else, that you are superior, that you're smarter, that you work harder than everyone. So having that higher, superior self-image is part of having that foggy mirror. In addition to our own misconceptions and preconceptions about ourselves, other things that can alter our self-concept is obsolete information. Maybe you've heard of the term cancel culture before. This is where we've done something in the past and people hold that against us, even though we may have learned from that mistake or something changed and we're not that person anymore. Obsolete information is something that people can hold against us and definitely hurt our self-concept or perception of another person. Up next, we have distorted feedback. This is where you have cruel classmates or people who try to bring your self-esteem down. This is not constructive criticism. Rather, they're trying to tear you apart. This constant false feedback can definitely lower your self-concept and your self-esteem. Abuse victims, whether it's spousal abuse or child abuse, suffer from distorted feedback, and it can be difficult to overcome because they can leave permanent scars on your social and your emotional well-being. Perfectionism can also cloud our self-concept because we may feel that we can't ever be good enough. This is the societal perception that we have to be perfect. And when you're trying to achieve something, that's not always possible because we're flawed and we all make mistakes. You're going to be able to achieve that healthy, well-balanced, true, honest self-concept. Societal expectations go right along with perfectionism. This is where we're trying to achieve a standard that may or may not be attainable. And this can definitely cloud our self-concept as well. We might be perfectly well-adjusted and well-dressed and financially okay, but if we're not meeting a media or a societal preconception of what it needs to be, we may always have lower self-esteem or a low self-concept about what we're trying to achieve or where we're trying to go or what we're trying to be in life. Oftentimes, our self-concept resists change. Our textbook talks about something called cognitive conservatism, which is the belief that we stay consistent when we are always changing every day throughout all of our life experiences. You may hear me talk a lot about the lenses that we see our world through, which is all of our different life experiences. And when these things change, we also change. Your textbook also talks about one of the most important components of having a healthy self-concept is the ability to be flexible, your ability to grow and change and to alter your personality as needed with different situations. A self-fulfilling prophecy occurs when a person's expectations of an event and their subsequent behaviors make the outcome more likely to occur. So a great example of this is attending college. You have an expectation that if you're going to college, that you're going to graduate with a good degree. And in those 2 years, hopefully, that you're at Palomar College, you're going to go to class, you get good grades, and that will make your graduation possible. So having that expectation and good motivation and attitude will help you in achieving the academic success you need in order to make that degree happen. There are 4 steps listed in your textbook. The first one is holding an expectation. Sometimes you are the mentor for someone or you're the champion for someone else. Just being a good friend. You can encourage them to get good grades, help people when they need it. In that place, you're holding an expectation for other people. Behaving in accordance with that expectation, this could just be yourself getting a good grade, or maybe you're helping a friend out. The expectation coming to pass, this is achieving that goal. And then finally, we have reinforcing that expectation or goal. And what that basically means is that you have this belief that you keep reinforcing for repeated attempts, whether it's getting another degree or going and getting that job. It's repeating the self-fulfillment that if you can achieve one thing, you're more likely to achieve other things that you can pursue later in life. Maybe you're learning how to play the piano and you can do it so well that maybe you feel you could pick up a guitar and learn how to do that as well. It's basically just continuing to make those goals and achieve them. Your textbook defines impression management as the communication strategies people use to influence how others view them. So impression management basically discusses how we can manage how others view us, or the communication strategies that we use that can influence how other people see us. Our textbook talks about the perceived self, and this is the person you believe yourself to be in moments of absolute honest self-examination. Your presenting self is your public image. This is how other people see or perceive you. And face work describes the verbal and nonverbal ways that we can act to maintain our own image, as well as how we interact with the image of others. So impression management can be very complex depending on different situations. Your textbook talks extensively about the fact that we have multiple identities or multiple personalities, for lack of a better word. Impression management is defined in your textbook as each of us constructs multiple identities, many of which may be independent or even conflicting. These vary based on the roles that we play in someone's life, on the audience to our behavior, as well as the medium over which we communicate. Our textbook talks about how in the course of a day we might be a neighbor to one person, but a friend to another person. We may be a spouse, a student, instructor, employee, employer, whatever. All these different roles change from minute to minute throughout the day. Like if I'm discussing something with a student, I'm going to behave in a certain way. And if my best friend calls me 5 minutes later, I'm going to talk to them in a different way. I may have a conversation with a colleague after that phone call, and I'll probably treat them very differently than when I speak to my supervisor after that. It's totally different roles. So I've appropriately changed my impression in all these different times in the scope of, like, let's say 20 minutes to accommodate each of these different relationships. In addition to our audience, we also change how we interact based on the medium we use to communicate, whether it's an email, text message, or phone call, or face-to-face interaction. How we behave changes in these various scenarios. Impression management is also collaborative. This means that we aren't just communicating just to communicate. It's not just a one-sided conversation. We always have an audience in that collaboration, whether it's intentional or unintentional, and this is what helps make the impression management an honest attempt. It can be deliberate or unconscious. Sometimes we can be very aware of who we're talking to. We may be more aware of our own behaviors when we're talking to a stranger versus someone that we're super comfortable with. We might allow ourselves to relax a little bit more and not pay as much attention to our nonverbal cues or our body language. This falls into self-disclosure, and this is the process of revealing ourselves. This is an incremental process. You don't meet someone for the first time and tell them your entire life story right away. At least you shouldn't do that. Self-disclosure is also composed of 3 important characteristics. First, it is honest. In self-disclosure, you're making an honest effort to reveal the truth about yourself. Second, this truth is often deep. We're not wanting to talk strictly about something that someone can find out about us just by Googling it, which leads us to availability of information. Sincere self-disclosure contains information that they can't get from another source. So if I tell you, hi, I'm an instructor at Palomar College, I'm not giving you anything that you can't find out on the internet. So although I'm sharing information, I wouldn't call that self-disclosure because it's something that you can find out easily about me just by knowing my name. So availability of information is generally something that nobody knows but you or someone else who is very close to you knows about you. That's a very big part of self-disclosure when you're digging to that next level. If you share some personal information, you're meeting these three characteristics of self-disclosure. There are two models of self-disclosure in your textbook. One of them is called the social penetration model. I believe this is on page 86 of your textbook. This model describes relationships in terms of depth. It talks about how a student's self-disclosure differs throughout the day based on how they feel about a person, or maybe how close they are with a parent. It could be different problems or maybe conflicts going on in their life, and rates things on a measure of importance. It could be how a student feels about their physical appearance versus how they're doing academically. So please take some time to look over the social penetration model and take a look at how this can affect not only you, but how it changes from person to person. We all have very different priorities and things that are close to us that we self-disclose, how we feel about our self-concept, and how others might perceive us. So a couple of examples could be, some people might say that being close to God or going to church is a very high priority, and that's very deep in their social model, whereas others may not be as religious. Some people are super family oriented, so that would be something very deep and broad in their wheel, whereas someone else may not have a whole lot to do with their family and they may prefer hanging out with their friends. The textbook also talks about cliches, which you hopefully understand to just be knee-jerk responses to scenarios. They are nothing that we really have any true investment in. We're not interested in a sincere response. We just kind of answer blindly. So an example would be, when you walk down the hallway at school, we don't stop and truly say to a friend, "Hey, how are you today?" and expect an answer. Not usually. We often just head nod and say, "Hey, what up?" And someone says, "Fine." And they may not be fine, and the first person may not really care, but that's just our way of acknowledging each other without getting any disclosure out of the exchange. Opinions are also very much a part of self-disclosure because it involves expressions of feelings. If I take the time to share my opinion with you, then I probably really care about what it is I'm talking about. And this is just another way that you can gauge self-disclosure and learn more about another person. The second model of self-disclosure is called the Johari window, and you can see it's framed like a window. This is on page 88 of your textbook. This window frames how open you are to yourself and others. It also shows how blind you are, meaning parts of yourself that are known to others but are not known to yourself. It also has your hidden side, which is known to yourself but you don't show to others, and your unknown spots. So these are parts that are not known to others and not known to yourself. So the hidden area here is information that you know that you aren't willing to reveal. These could be your secrets. But there are truly some parts of ourselves that aren't known. These could be buried memories. When we talk about life experiences, we don't remember every single day that we lived. These are things that have impacted us that we don't truly remember, that cause us to respond in a certain way. There are several benefits to self-disclosure. They include catharsis. Catharsis is just getting things off your chest. This is where you speak to a friend, you tell them how horrible your day was or how horrible a situation was. Maybe your teacher gave you a really bad grade and you're really upset and you just had a bad day. So catharsis, for the sake of catharsis, is great, but it should not be the only reason you talk to your friends or to your family. Because if you just share catharsis and nothing else with a friend, eventually they're just going to think that you're a Debbie Downer and you complain all the time. And that gives you a poor perception by that person. Self-clarification is someone with whom you can share your thoughts, ideas, and beliefs with, whereas self-validation is where you seek the listener's approval. For me, this would be talking to another teacher, and I might be saying something like, "I'm thinking of trying out this new technique in the classroom. What do you think? You think it's a good exercise?" Basically just running an idea by someone before you act on it. It's getting that second ear to make sure your thoughts are in the right place. Reciprocity is just the act of having self-disclosure with others. It's very much relationship oriented, and it applies both to online and to in-person relationships. It's usually considered part of support groups where people join maybe a breast cancer support group, for example, for those that are ill. And it's basically a way for people to share about their life situations and get that extra help or support that they may need. Impression formation is where we have self-disclosure conversations that are somewhat measured. This is where you start to reveal yourself in order to show someone who you are. And when we do this, we're managing our impression. When we meet someone for the first time, we're usually a lot more careful about what you tell them and how much you tell them, because when we're meeting people for the first time, we're usually concerned about what other people think of us. And this is a form of relationship management as well. This also leads us to the risks of self-disclosure. The fear of rejection. Oftentimes, the fear of disapproval is really powerful because there is a real risk when revealing our personal information. It can decrease the happiness of a relationship if you are overly honest or disclose way too much. You can end up hurting the other person if you're way too honest, or you can build a negative impression. Sometimes people are afraid to tell the truth because they're just afraid of getting rejected or getting teased. Just being honest really opens a person up to a lot of ridicule if it's not done the right way and to the right people. When we talked about hyper-personal communication, when I was talking about social media, hyper-sharing often gets people in trouble because they don't manage their risks and they just give out way too much information, and then suddenly someone has this information that they can use against them or use it negatively in some way. And that's just one of the huge fears of self-disclosure in online communication, because people don't always know who they are talking to. They're missing that honesty piece in self-disclosure and jumping right into the depth. Alternatives to self-disclosure include silence, lying, equivocation, and hinting. Honesty is always the best policy, but sometimes it just doesn't work in all situations. Sometimes you want to keep your mouth shut. Sometimes it's just a responsible thing to do, which is probably something I struggle with at times because I'm a very open person, an honest person, and I should probably bite my tongue. So an alternative to silence when you're trying to be nice or not reveal your true self is lying. A lie is just a flat-out deliberate attempt to misrepresent the truth. It's unfair because people often don't know you're lying, and it's also, of course, very unethical. Benevolent lies are more of like a little white lie. They're not considered to be malicious, right? You're not trying to hurt someone, but it's definitely a possibility. Benevolent lies are like telling your girlfriend that she looks great in a dress that's ugly, or just lying to save face, or to not hurt someone's feelings. But in the end, it's still a lie, and yes, it is still unethical, but at times it's considered a great alternative if you're maybe potentially hurting someone. A term that you may or may not be familiar with is equivocation, and this is simply statements that aren't literally lying, but you cleverly avoid an unpleasant truth. It's just a way to be polite. So this kind of goes right along with hinting. So instead of saying, you're fat, don't order that dessert, you might say something like, this dessert is really kind of overpriced. There are a whole bunch of examples in your textbook, probably better than the example that I just gave right now. Here are a list of things to review for Chapter 3. Please look these over. Please make sure to read your textbook and actually read the chapters. I think that's it for now. I hope you guys are having an awesome day, and I'll see you in the next lecture video. Take care.